from Winchester? Okay, good. Pretty long drive down for you. I'm from Boston. The 30 miles up the road. That's right. That's right.
Okay, it took me almost 3 hours.
It's a long haul. How was traffic today?
Sit on the planning district commission.
It was, once I got
It's a party with Rocky Lane, Harrisonburg,
Pretty good. Did it? Harrisonburg's pretty congested, isn't it?
yes, it is.
Yeah. Pretty full room.
How long you
Been in
Good afternoon.
9 years. Yes, sir.
Everybody ready to go?
sir.
Perfect.
Yep.
For those of y'all that I have not met or do not know, my name is Shep Miller, and I am extremely happy and proud to be here today as Secretary of Transportation, representing the Governor and his cabinet. And before we get started with our agenda, I'd like to thank my colleagues from the CTB who I continue to serve with and have served with for some time, Dr. Ray Smoot, Salem District Representative, who's here today, and a great friend, and Mr. Mark Merrill from Winchester, who's here today, the Stanton District. Both extremely valuable members of our board and good friends and colleagues. So it's great to be able to partner with them. We've got a lot of staff here, of course, to support this meeting, and the committee is here. And I won't introduce all of them, but they'll do that at the appropriate times. You know, the governor and his cabinet, we've been in office for about 6 months now, and it's been an extremely busy time, I will tell you. The governor is a business guy whose whole life has basically been making business run better. He's all about it. And he is an extremely hardworking gentleman who works from about 6 to about 10, sometimes later. I can attest to that. The other day he was looking for some information. It was a Sunday night. It was about 9:30, and he texted me. And I told him by text, I said, Governor, I'm not sure I can get that for you tonight because my people, you know, I need to get some people that are out of town. He said, well, first thing in the morning would be fine. First thing meaning like 6. I'm thinking, well, what's the difference between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.? So that's the kind of guy he is, but it's inspiring to work for him and to serve with him. And he cares about Virginia and its citizens. He's particularly interested in this project, the I-81 corridor. He understands, as we all do, that it continues to need resources to be as viable as it needs to be. And so one of the things that he's asked me to do, and I was interested in anyway, is to work with my colleagues, the CTB and our staff members, Commissioner Britch and Director DeBrule, my secretariats, represented here by my Deputy Secretary, John Lawson, who's over here. John's a 30-year VDOT veteran who moved over to the Secretariat a few years back. Michael Sargent, another Assistant Secretary, is here today. And most importantly, I want you to stand up, Bond. Bond is a governor's fellow who's joined us in our office to help us during the summer. He's at University of Richmond. He's from Jacksonville, Florida, and it's a governor's fellow means a couple things. One, it means you're a good person. Two, it means you're doing well in school. And so we like having smart, good people around us, and we're glad to have Bond with us and glad we were able to bring him out. So without further ado, the first item on the agenda today is to elect our chair. So I'm going to call for nominations from the committee for that purpose.
Secretary,
Dr. Smoot.
I would like to nominate Delegate Terry Austin. Those who have been at this for a while know that Terry once chaired this committee. He is now in a position as the chair of the House Transportation Committee to keep an eye on this important project, and as such, I'd like to see him as chair of the committee. So moved.
Second.
Mr. Secretary.
So we got a second from Delegate Wilt. Are there further nominations? And I'll rule that the nominations are closed, and we can do this by, we don't need a roll call because no one's on the phone today. Senator Pillion's on the phone. Senator Pillion, are you on the phone?
Yeah, and I'm all for Terry Austin.
Okay, great. He's in the house, so to speak. So we're going to do this by roll call as our protocol would require us to do. So let me call the roll, please. So we've got the nomination of Terry Austin as chairman, and I'll go down the list and ask for your vote. Delegate Ballard. Aye. Delegate Austin.
Aye.
Delegate Wilt.
Aye.
Delegate Wiley. Aye. Senator Edwards. Senator Deeds.
Aye.
Senator Pillion.
Aye.
Senator Pillion votes aye. Chairman Friedman. Aye. Chairman North. Aye. Chairman Johnson. Aye. Chairman Morris. Chairman Green. Aye. Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Mr. Folks. Is Mr. Folks here? I haven't seen him here today.
Could be here.
And Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
Aye. So the ayes have it. Mr. Chairman, you're another chairman. I'll turn the gavel over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
You're going to do that? Yes, sir. So I'm going to deviate a little bit from the agenda because I think it's more appropriate. We now have a chairman, so I'm turning the meeting over to the chairman. And his first item of business would be to nominate and elect a vice chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me grab my notes 1 second, please.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Time for a cookie break.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And before we go through that business of nominating and electing a vice chair, I'd just like to make a few comments. I served with the Secretary Miller on the landing team for our now governor, Governor Youngkin, and had the pleasure to be acquainted with Shep and get to know him very well. And what a privilege it is to have someone who served on our CTB to now serve as our Secretary of Transportation. Our CTB has some very astute members who do a phenomenal job with appropriating the funds to improve the transportation system in the Commonwealth. And it's nice to have somebody as a secretary who understands how that process all works. And so, Mr. Miller, Secretary Miller, I commend you on the efforts and work you've done to date for the Commonwealth. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And in doing so, in saying that, I'll also elaborate to the staff. Commissioner Britch, who's sitting beside the Secretary, Stephen Britch has been the commissioner under the previous administration. He does a phenomenal job. Jennifer Brule, who's serving for our Department of Rail and Mass Transit, took over when Jennifer Mitchell left. Jennifer's doing a great job also. So we've got a good staff at VDOT, all of our transportation departments, the Winchester, the Stanton, the Salem, and the Bristol districts. Ken King's here, and I don't recognize, I see some people from the Stanton district. There's Randy Kaiser sitting there. You ever see Randy? And I don't see anyone from Bristol. If you're here, I don't see anyone. Okay, yes, all right, thank you. Our transportation districts do a great job also. We're very challenged with I-81, 320 miles through the Commonwealth. It's in tremendous need of improvement, and that's what this committee is tasked with doing. This committee reports to the CTB in form of recommendations on the phasing or the projects that move forward and move to possible potential funding. You know, we appropriated $2 billion in improvements. That's going to make significant improvements. We've done that through safety enhancements and cameras, chevrons, traffic safety patrol, the TRIP program. There's been tremendous enhancements on the corridor. And now we're getting to the point where we've had time to design and begin to implement some third laning. And we're going to hear about that today by Dave Covington, who is the project coordinator for VDOT. So just wanted to open with that and thank you all for the confidence you placed in me. I served as the chair of the Transportation Committee in the House of Delegates. I've served on that committee for 9 years. Transportation is a passion of mine. But I also want the real passion is I-81 corridor, seeing that we continue to improve and advance that. This funding will, the funding in place today will expire in 2034, thereabout. We've fulfilled all of our obligations. There will be a continuing stream of funding, but not to the magnitude that we have today. So we've got to look beyond that and posture and position ourselves to continue to make those improvements as we see necessary going forward. So thank you all for the privilege to serve as your chairman. And I think by legislation we're required to meet twice a year. And we will meet again, I would hope, prior to us returning to Richmond to be in session for the next session in January. So I will now open the floor for nominations for vice chair of the committee. Anyone like to make a nomination?
Motion, Delegate Wilt.
Delegate Wiley, is there a second for? Delegate Wiley nominated Delegate Wilt, is that correct?
Correct.
Is there
Second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, there's a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, we got a roll call, I apologize. Yep, yes, sir, if you would, please.
A motion to elect Delegate Wilt as the vice chair. Delegate Ballard. Aye. Delegate Austin. Aye. Delegate Wilt. Aye. Delegate Wiley. Aye. Senator Edwards. Senator Deeds.
I'll say aye, but I'll point out that typically these commissions have one house in charge and the other house as vice chair. So I don't know, I don't want to set a bad precedent. I'll vote aye, but I just want to make that point.
Thank you, Senator Deeds.
Senator Pillion.
Aye.
Senator Pillion votes aye. Chairman Friedman. Aye. Chairman North. Aye. Chairman Johnson. Aye. Chairman Morris. Chairman Green. Aye. Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Mr. Folks. Mr. Merrill. Aye. Thank you very much.
Wilt. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We appreciate that. And Delegate Wilt lives up the valley, lives in the Harrisonburg district, well, the Harrisonburg area, the Stanton district of the corridor. Tony served on this committee from conception. He served from the very beginning, so we welcome him here to serve today. At this time, I would ask that let's go around the room, if we would, and just introduce ourselves and talk a little bit about what you do and where you're from. And Bill, if you don't mind, Delegate Wiley, if you don't mind, let's start with you, please.
Anybody? Oh, you can hear me. Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Delegate Bill Wiley. I'm actually originally from this neck of the woods, Roanoke, Virginia. I hail from this area and came down here yesterday to be with some friends and some business folks I work with, and glad to be here. Certainly, it's an honor to be serving in this committee. Went to school up in Northern Virginia, and over time ended up in Winchester, where my wife and I and 3 boys live. We've been there for almost 21 years, and I work in the construction industry. Travel 81, I know 81, just about every exit number, where it goes, and I've driven it so many times I could probably drive it. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but anyway, it's an honor to be here and hope to make good improvements on this stretch of highway. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Ballard. I represent the 12th House District, which encompasses all of Giles County, town of Blacksburg, city of Radford, and just a little bit of Pulaski County. My full-time job is I am a lawyer, and then my 2 part-time jobs, one is being in the House of Delegates, and then the other is an Army officer. I've served in the U.S. Army for the last 18 years. I've been in combat 4 times, and so it is truly an honor to represent my community and represent the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's quite an honor to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hi, my name is Hill Johnson. I'm new to the committee. I'm from Christiansburg. I serve currently as the chairman for the New River Valley Regional Commission. I also am the chairman for Christiansburg Planning Commission. I've lived in Christiansburg for approximately 25 years, where we raised our family, and I am now retired and have no plans to move away from the New River Valley.
I'm Phil North, and I serve on the Roanoke Valley Transportation Planning Organization, also as chair of the Roanoke Valley Allegheny Regional Commission. am in my 5th year as a supervisor in Roanoke County. Also serve on the Transportation Steering Committee as chair for Virginia counties, and also serve on the Transportation Steering Committee for the national counties. I like transportation. I worked 39 years at Norfolk Southern. I retired, and someone tapped me on my shoulder, and here I am today, and I'm glad to be part of this committee. Thank you.
I'm Ray Smoot from Montgomery County. I represent the Salem District on the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Also am chair of the Go Virginia Regional 2 Council, which basically is Lynchburg, Roanoke Valley, New River Valley, and Allegheny Highlands. And have enjoyed getting acquainted with all the folks in transportation. I think the Commonwealth is very well served by those who are looking after our transportation needs and opportunities.
Okay, I'm Willie Green. I'm from Galax. I serve as the mayor of the city of Galax, and I represent the Mount Rogers Planning District as chair. And it is an honor to be here. I'm glad to be here, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Yeah, Delegate Tony Wilt represent what is currently the 26th House District. As we all know, those things are going to change here, it's fastly approaching. But for now, 26th House District is City of Harrisonburg and a portion of Rockingham County. And just a side note, the new district will be 34. It's going to be the same thing, a portion of Rockingham County and the City of Harrisonburg. So with all that said, I-81 is a vital artery for the state and goes through that area, and I'm certainly honored to be on this committee. In the House of Delegates, I'm honored to serve on the Agriculture, Chesapeake Bay Natural Resources Committee, Commerce and Energy, Public Safety. I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and I'm also on the Rules Committee, and so it's an honor to be here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Pillion, are you available to have a little brief introduction of your background?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Pillion, I represent the 40th Senate District, which is Lee, Scott, Wise, Washington, Smith, with
Senator
Grayson
Pillion, can you
city.
get a little closer to the mic, please? We can barely hear
Sure,
you here.
of course. Okay, yeah. So Todd Pillion, I represent the 40th Senate District, which is Lee, Scott, Wise, Washington, Smith, with Grayson and the city of Bristol. Under the new lines, it'll be basically all of Southwest Virginia. But happy to be with you guys today. Unfortunately, I'm not there. We actually have a big casino opening, the first in Virginia opening this afternoon, and lots of stuff going on with that. And I apologize for not being present.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Delegate Terry Austin. I chair transportation in the House, and I serve on the Appropriations Committee and vice chair there. I serve on rules. I represent the 19th House District, which is Allegheny County, Botetourt, City of Covington, over into Bedford. My new district will go down into Rockbridge. I'll have Craig County. I'll no longer have Bedford County. I've served on the Transportation Committee for 9 years while I've served in the General Assembly. I'm a business owner. I've owned a business for 45 years. We do transportation-related work, airport work. So I have a passion for transportation, and I really appreciate the excitement that this committee has brought to transportation in the Valley of Virginia. I think it was time, it was necessary, the need was there and presented itself to improve that corridor, and that's what this commission takes to heart. So I thank all of you today. Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I told you, name is Shep Miller. I grew up and continue to live in the city of Norfolk, right next to the Norfolk and Western, now Norfolk and Southern coal piers. So I'm well familiar with sort of the connection between between Roanoke and Norfolk with the railroad, and grew up as a big fan of the railroad. I went through the public schools in the city of Norfolk, went off to college in Hampton-Sydney, and then William & Mary, where I got my MBA. My dear bride, who we've been married for 38 years now, went to Hollins. So I spent a lot of time in this neck of the woods in the later 70s, and worked in the General Assembly. That was my first service to the Commonwealth in 1980 as an aide to the Senate. Took me 40-some years to get back, but here I am. And I retired about 5 years ago, Mr. North, so be careful. I retired about 5 years ago after selling up my business, which is defense contracting business and fiber optics. And was loving life at my farm in Middlesex County, and got 4 kids and 3 grandkids, and life was good. And now life's even better because I get to work with y'all and serve our citizens and our governor, and I'm just ecstatic to do so. It's really quite rewarding. So I grew up in Norfolk. I've been in Norfolk my whole life, and all of a sudden I'm living in Richmond, Phil, so be careful. Thank you. Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, my name's Stephen Britch, the Commissioner of the Virginia Department of Transportation. I'm happy to say that I too live on the eastern part of the state, but cherish the days that I can come out to the western part of the state and view the scenery. Resident of Virginia Beach during the weekend, and then as Secretary Miller said, live in Richmond during the week. So graduate of Old Dominion University, just down the street from Secretary Miller, and as well as a graduate of the University of Virginia. I'm happy to say too that when we started in 2018, we started putting together a very targeted plan to be able to make the improvements to Interstate 81. And I think at that point in time, in 2018, there was no money attached, and then in 2019, the funding became available, and I thank the members of the General Assembly for that. But I think one very important part to say for today, this program is only 3 years old. July 1st, 2019 we implemented the Safety Service Patrol and did some other operational improvements. So what you see today with what Dave Covington, our director of the I-81 program delivery, is going to present today is only 3 years in the making. And I think this is we have a number of projects that are still in the development phase, but we have a number of projects that have been completed, and he'll shed a little bit of light on it. But 3 years to take for what we have done with zero engineering, zero environmental documents in hand, and I think we've made some very good improvements along the corridor in a very short period of time. We do have a lot more work to do, and I'm in agreement with that. But Dave will give a quick overview of where we are, and then we'll have the Chief Financial Officer also give an update on where we are on the funding side of this in the outer years as well, 2033 and beyond.
Mr. Chair, Jennifer DeBrule, I'm the Director of the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. I have 29 years of service to the transportation community in the Commonwealth. I live in Hanover County. Like the two gentlemen to my left, I'm a native of Hampton Roads. Didn't stay there very long. I actually spent a significant amount of my upbringing living in Shenandoah County and the I-81 corridor. So I have ties to the corridor and to the valley, and love to be back in this part of the state. From my background, let me also say I'm a proud graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University. From our side, I had the great privilege to work on the multimodal plan for I-81, and that's one of those things that has some short-term components and some long-term components of it. So our team today, Grant Sparks, who's our acting chief of public transportation, is going to give you an update on the Virginia Breeze intercity bus service. That's an early win for us with the multimodal plan. And then Mike McLaughlin, who's my colleague from the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, is going to talk about the Western Rail Initiative and really exciting developments in that project as we get ready to welcome a second train to Roanoke on Monday. So big things happening in the intermodal space and the multimodal space, and I'm excited to be here.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Friedman. I was born in Blacksburg, Virginia, and moved to Lexington between first and second grade, and that was home for my upbringing. I, too, went to the school that creates good men and good citizens of Hampden-Sydney, and have the distinct honor and privilege of being the mayor of Lexington, which provides me a seat on the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission. Elated to, or in the PDC for Central Shenandoah, covers a great deal of 81 from Lexington on the south to Rockingham County on the north and all between, including Stanton, Augusta, and Waynesboro. I'm excited to be a participant of this group and am one of the charter members of this committee. Excited for the opportunity to enhance the safety and productivity of our community and our valley in I-81. And I want to be sure to invite each and every one of you to stop by in Lexington, come see us and have a drink, a meal, and visit our charming downtown.
My name is Mark Merrill. I'm a relative newcomer to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. I was appointed in November of 2020. I recently retired as President and CEO of Valley Health System, headquartered in Winchester, Virginia. We have 6 hospitals, 2 in West Virginia and 4 in Virginia. I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, both undergraduate and graduate degree. My 36 years in healthcare were primarily concentrated in Washington, D.C. at MedStar Health. I spent 15 years in Dallas, Texas at Presbyterian Hospital, Dallas, before moving to Virginia to take the position at Valley Health. Transportation is a critical component of infrastructure, economic development, but also healthcare. The chairman of the board of Valley Health, who was chairman when I was hired, had served on the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and I got an introduction to the complexities of transportation. I thought healthcare was pretty complicated. Transportation is giving healthcare a run for its money. But I would like to also echo what Chairman Austin said about the outstanding work that I have seen by the VDOT staff. Just very impressive, the caliber of personnel, the expertise, the due diligence, and the thoroughness of their work with looking at data and information. So it's been a privilege to serve with my colleagues on the CTB.
And I'm Creed Deeds. I'm a member of the Senate. I represent the 25th district. Redistricting is going to change all of that, but that's a longer story that we don't need to discuss right now. I'm also a practicing lawyer. I was in court in Charlottesville Tuesday. I was in court in Warm Springs yesterday, in Covington yesterday. I'll be back in court in Covington tomorrow. I was chairman of the Transportation Committee in the Senate 8 years ago. I was on that committee for many years. I remain on the Transportation Subcommittee of the Senate Finance. I chair the Capital Outlay Subcommittee of Senate Finance. I'm co-chair of Senate Judiciary, and I'm the chair of the Behavioral Health Commission. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Let me briefly say Senator Edwards serves on this committee also, and Senator Edwards is from here in Roanoke. And Senator Edwards was very instrumental in supporting financial funding and this appropriation when it went through both the House and the Senate and on to the governor for support. And I just can't say how appreciative I am of Senator Edwards's help on promoting transportation in Southwest Virginia. The train, as Mr. Brule mentioned, to Roanoke, Senator Edwards was very instrumental in making certain that train got here and on to Christiansburg. So I don't know where Senator Edwards is today, but I certainly miss him, and I very much appreciate his support for transportation and our endeavors in the Commonwealth. So I appreciate that. I'll now call the meeting to order. A gavel there. So before us today are the minutes for the meeting of April 21, 2021, and I would encourage anyone who was not present or not a member of this committee at that time. I will be abstaining from that. Our new members, I would encourage you to also do the same, to abstain. We were not present. We were not part of that meeting. I think that was a virtual meeting, if I'm not mistaken. So I hope everyone's had the privilege or opportunity to review the minutes. Are there any discussion or amendments or changes necessary to the minutes? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All right. Everyone in favor of the minutes who should not be abstaining now vote to approve the minutes.
Chairman, I think we still need a roll call.
We do no roll call?
I'll
Okay.
call the roll.
All votes are roll call votes?
I think so, sir.
Okay.
Because Senator Payne's on the phone, I think that's the protocol.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, Secretary.
Delegate Ballard.
I'll abstain since I was not present at that meeting.
Delegate Austin.
Not present, abstaining.
Delegate Wilt.
Aye.
Delegate Wiley.
Not present, abstain.
Senator Edwards. Senator Deeds.
I don't think I was present either, so I ought to abstain.
Senator Pillion. Chairman Friedman.
Aye.
Chairman North.
And I wasn't present.
Chairman Johnson.
Not present. Abstain.
Chairman Morris. Chairman Green.
I think that was the only meeting I attended. I would say. I'm not really sure. I do remember attending one meeting. I'm voting aye.
Dr. Smoot?
Aye.
Mr. Folks is not here. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
The ayes have it.
so that I would assume the minutes are approved, so. Okay, having moved through that, we will now move to the I-81 corridor improvement status. Dave Covington, Director, I-81 Program Coordinator. Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Secretary Miller, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm very glad to be here to provide an update on the I-81 program. I'm especially glad to be here now in person after having a couple of years of virtual presentations. So we'll get started. If you could advance to the next slide, please. Oh, clicker. Okay. I get to control that. That's great. Make sure I do it correctly. Okay. Just a quick review of the core of the I-81 program, and myself and the entire team that works on this program goes back to these three tenets of the program whenever we're making decisions. And it is quite simple, but very important. Enhancing safety, reducing congestion, and then providing additional opportunity for economic development. This slide, I'm sure everybody is very familiar with where I-81 lies within the state. But the importance of this slide is on the left-hand side. The number of localities that we are coordinating with on pretty much a daily basis along the corridor. These projects affect a lot of people's lives, and we really want to reach down at the local level and make sure that the projects that we are delivering meet the needs of the localities to the best extent possible. And we've developed some very good working relationships with these counties and cities and towns, and we hope to continue with that. We've been able to realize some efficiencies through some mutually beneficial agreements with the localities that we also hope to continue forward with. So we will review the takeaway scorecard. This, we hope, really starts to paint a picture of where we're at with the program to date. We've separated this slide into our operational projects and our capital projects. So the operational projects are things like signal improvements and safety service patrol expansion. The capital projects are generally the bigger dollar physical transportation improvements like corridor widening, and we will step through each one of these types of capital improvements to demonstrate where we're at today and where we're heading in the future. So to start with the operational projects, we are nearly complete with all of our operational projects. We have improved our incident clearance time through the TRIP program rather dramatically, as well as some lift and tow devices on our safety service patrol vehicles. We've expanded the safety service patrol with additional hours, additional routes, and additional personnel. We've installed 51 additional cameras along the corridor, and this really helps us identify and respond more quickly to incidents on the interstate, because our traffic operations centers can quickly view these cameras and deploy resources when necessary, which helps to drive down that clearance time as well. We have installed 30 additional digital message signs along the corridor, and these allow us to communicate with drivers on the interstate in real time, but possibly more importantly, it allows us to communicate with folks who are looking to get on the interstate, and we can alert them that there is an incident on the interstate so they can take an alternate route and not add to that queue that is building up because of an incident. The arterial upgrades are unique. All along the corridor, we do not have the most reliable parallel roadway network to I-81. So what we need to do is enhance the efficiency of those parallel routes as much as we possibly can. And what this involves is really installing smart signal technology and expanding fiber optic connections to these systems so that when we do have an incident on the interstate and everybody is following their apps or following messaging from VDOT to tell them how to navigate around this incident or whether to stay on the interstate. But we are able to very quickly adjust signal timing to give priority to that route so that through these small towns where we have significant issues when we have incidents on the interstate, we're able to much more quickly push that traffic through the town instead of basically creating a multi-hour jam in a small town that ordinarily does not see this type of traffic. So we are currently underway. We have VDOT signal systems along some of these routes that are already have been upgraded or are being upgraded now. And then we have locality-owned signals. So these are signals that are owned by towns and cities. Many of these are not upgraded to smart signal technology, and that requires us executing a memorandum of agreement with these localities so that we can determine who's responsible for long-term maintenance and things like that, and daily operation. So we have been executing those memorandums of agreement. We're getting close to finalizing that, and then we will begin putting those projects out to bid for construction. So VDOT system predominantly done. Locality system will be starting here in the very near future. Moving on to the capital projects. We have completed 23 projects to date. And I know that a lot of people who drive the corridor maybe don't understand this because you're not seeing major significant construction. But our low-hanging fruit was the interchange entrances and exits. These were projects that we could put out to bid quickly, required relatively little engineering. Some of them don't require right-of-way acquisition, which is a timely process, and had minimal impacts to the environment. So we were able to prioritize those projects, put them out to bid, and complete quite a few of those projects. Active construction projects, we currently have 15 projects that are under construction right now. 8 of those projects are scheduled to be completed this year. 4 of those projects will be completed next year, and 2 of those projects will be completed in 2026. And the 2 projects that are bundled together for completion in 2026, that is a large multi-million dollar or a couple $100 million project. So it does take some time to advance that project to completion. We do have 26 remaining capital improvement projects. They will all be completed by the year 2033 or sooner. So let's take a little closer look at the types of projects. One of the most significant types of capital improvement projects we have is widening. So this is corridor widening, where we're adding one lane in either one direction or in both directions, northbound and southbound. We have 10 widening projects along the corridor. 2 of those projects are under construction now. They're just south of here. If you came from the south, you probably drove through that work zone from exit 137 to exit 141. Those were 2 projects that we saw an opportunity to bundle those projects together and deliver them under one design build contract. That project is scheduled to be completed in 2026. We have 8 more widening projects along the corridor, and as I mentioned on the previous slide, all of those are scheduled to be completed by 2033 or earlier. Next type of project that we have is what I talked about, the low-hanging fruit, the acceleration and deceleration extension lanes. We have 36 of those along the corridor that are within the program. To date, we've completed 15 of those. And we also have 11 of those under construction right now. 7 of those 11 under construction right now are scheduled to be completed this year, and 4 of those are scheduled to be completed next year. That leaves us with 10 additional acceleration and deceleration projects that won't be funded until July of next year, that we will deliver before 2033. Next type of project are truck climbing lanes. Anybody who drives I-81 frequently probably is very familiar with truck climbing lanes and the success of the truck climbing lanes that we have installed in the past. We have 5 truck climbing lane projects along the corridor. We have 1 truck climbing lane project that just went to construction that will be completed in 2024. And then we will have 4 remaining that will be funded in the near future to be completed before 2033.
Dave, can you tell us where that one project is located, please?
It's in the Bristol district. That's mile marker 54, right, Gene? Is that 54? 54. Yeah, 54. Okay. That was just awarded for construction, so it is entered the construction phase, and we'll have active construction soon.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. The next type of project is an auxiliary lane. So generally, auxiliary lanes connect 2 interchanges so that traffic doesn't have to merge into the main line, which reduces the number of friction points that we have, which enhances safety and reduces congestion. We have 4 auxiliary lane projects, 1 under construction right now that is also in the Bristol district, and 3 future projects. The next one that we do anticipate, the next significant auxiliary lane project that we will advertise in the Stanton district between exit 221 and 220. So that's from 64 westbound to I-81 southbound. We have a significant volume of traffic that is taking the very next exit. So that's one of our significant auxiliary lane projects to come in the near future. Next type of project is a shoulder widening project. We only have one shoulder widening project on the corridor, and that's in Rockbridge County. So that project is not scheduled to begin construction until 2026. It's what we term an out-year project, where we won't receive funding to begin development of that project until July of next year. I've also added 8 curve improvements to this slide instead of including another slide, but the curve improvements are static and flashing chevrons, and we heard a little bit about that earlier. That was one of the first things that we were able to deliver with the program. It didn't require much engineering. It didn't require right-of-way. We were able to do it very quickly, and we've seen significant improvements in those areas where we have been able to install those chevron signs. Okay, types of projects. These are the operational projects now that we're going to look at. And we've got basically 5 types of operational projects, and some of this you saw on the scorecard. New digital message signs have all been completed. New traffic cameras have all been completed. The extended safety service patrol has all been completed. The improved incident clearance time through the TRIP program and our lift and tow device installation has been completed. And that leaves our detour route improvements, or our alternative route improvements. And those are the signal upgrades that we talked about before. And we do anticipate, many of those are under construction now or have already been completed on the VDOT system, and we're getting started on the locality system, and we anticipate having all of that work done by 2025. So this is a little bit different type of breakdown of where we're at in the project development process with each one of our projects. So we have 64 capital improvement projects. This does not include the operational projects. This is the capital improvement projects. And we have 6 projects right now that are in the planning phase. And those projects are projects that we were able to secure some advanced funding for those projects for us to begin preliminary engineering, to start taking a look at what is this project going to look like? Can we get a head start on delivery? And we, especially our project managers, have done a very good job of looking ahead and trying to anticipate what a project would look like before we even get to the design phase. And it helps us navigate through the project development process much more quickly. We have 8 projects that are currently in the preliminary engineering and environmental evaluation phase. Those are also mostly projects that are out in the future that we've been able to get a little bit of funding to start looking at what are the environmental impacts, and from a planning level perspective, what does this project look like, especially with the coordination with the localities. We have 11 projects in design right now, and most of those 11 projects are significant projects. They're the widening projects, truck climbing lane projects. These are our biggest projects that are in the design phase right now. And it does take quite a bit of time to navigate through our project development process, especially when it comes to our environmental evaluations and the right-of-way acquisition phase. We have some projects that we're looking at now that will be entering the right-of-way acquisition phase soon, and it is a rather extensive process and takes some time. But we are working very diligently on advancing those projects as quickly as we can. We have one project that recently entered the right-of-way and utility relocation phase. That is the auxiliary lane project I mentioned earlier at the northern I-64 interchange in Augusta County. We have 15 projects that are currently under construction, and again, 23 projects that are complete. So that is where all 64 of our projects lie along our project development process. We'll take a look at the breakdown by our construction districts, and I'll start with Bristol District. We have a lot of activity in Bristol District. Gene Holly, who's the project manager for these projects, has done a fantastic job of being innovative and helping to push these projects through. And you can see that we've got quite a few completed projects here. The first one wasn't even a project until we noticed that we could gain some efficiency by putting out a pavement schedule contract to prep for 5 of our projects. So this enabled us to execute the contracts on these acceleration and deceleration lane projects And they're able to get quickly to appreciable work. The contractors are, because we've already stabilized the shoulders. They can shift traffic. So that was a big win for us in Bristol District, and we're looking to do that elsewhere also. But just a quick look at the projects that are completed. Exit 26 southbound and acceleration and southbound deceleration lane there at Emory. We've got the exit 67 deceleration lane extension just below Wytheville. Exit 19 deceleration lane extension in Abingdon. And exit 84 southbound deceleration lane extension that's just north of Fort Chiswell. So projects that are under construction now, we've got a rather large bundle project, and we do like to bundle these acceleration and deceleration lane projects whenever we can. It drives costs down and enhances the efficiency of delivery. So we have a project now that bundles exit 39 northbound deceleration, exit 47 southbound acceleration, exit 39 southbound deceleration, and the exit 43 southbound acceleration under construction. So 4 projects bundled under one contract with one builder. In addition, we have the exit 39 southbound acceleration lane extension at 7 Mile Forward, exit 47 northbound acceleration lane extension in Marion. That is a single phase design build project, which we're very happy about because we've been able to attract a new contractor. This is their first design build project, and they're doing very well. They will complete the project on schedule. So we're also trying to build the industry where we can. Exit 17 southbound acceleration lane extension in Abingdon. We bundled that with a smart scale project. Exit 39 northbound entrance ramp. That's for the that's a truck climbing lane. That's, exit 39 northbound extension ramp to mile marker 40.6. And the exit 54 southbound auxiliary lane. So before, I apologize, that truck climbing lane was at exit 39. The auxiliary lane was at exit 54, Mr. Chairman. Then a quick look at upcoming projects. Exit 72 northbound extension, and you're probably thinking exit 72, that's on I-77, and exit 41 to I-81 southbound. So we're looking at bundling these two projects together. These projects we are advancing ahead of schedule, bundling them as a single design build project, and we do expect that the RFQ, or request for qualifications, I apologize, will go out next year. So we will begin that process to expedite those two projects. Moving north to the Salem District. We have one project that's completed in Salem District, but there's a good reason for that. Salem District has far fewer projects, but much larger projects. So we were able to complete the exit 89 northbound acceleration lane extension in Pulaski rather quickly. But we are in heavy design phase here in Salem District. Projects that are currently under construction, exit 137 to exit 141 widening northbound and southbound. This is a design build project. And very early on in the development of the program, we decided to expedite this project. It is an important project just outside of the downtown Roanoke area in Salem. And we were able to move to a design build contract rather quickly. They are under construction now. And as I mentioned previously, that project is scheduled to be completed in 2026. But this is one of our front runners. This is one that, we're going to get everything right and make sure that the public is on board with the delivery, the way that we're delivering these projects. We also have two projects that are bundled together at the Troutville Rest area. So if you came from the north today at mile marker 158, you drove past the Troutville Rest area. That is under construction now, extending both the entrance and exit. But also importantly, we are able to add about 12 additional truck parking spaces at the rest area, because truck parking is an issue along the entire corridor, not just in Virginia. That project is scheduled to be completed this October, and so far they are on schedule to complete that. We do have some big exciting projects coming up in the Salem District. Mile marker 116 to exit 128. So this is northbound Christiansburg Mountain as a widening to 3 lanes. Construction is anticipated to begin in 2027 on that project. That is a project that's not fully funded yet. We have exit 128 to exit 137 widening, again northbound. So this would pick up where that Christiansburg Mountain project stops and carry it up to where the design build project that we are constructing now So at the completion of all of those projects, we will have 3 lanes northbound all the way from Christiansburg to Roanoke. That project is now funded. And then exit 143 to exit 150, so this is from I-581 north to Troutville, widening to 3 lanes in both directions, is one of our largest and quite honestly one of our most complex projects. So we are diligently working through the design phase of that project. We do anticipate that it could go to construction in 2026. Moving further north to the Stanton district, we have quite a few completed projects. Again, all of them, all of the capital projects are acceleration and deceleration lane extensions. Exit 302 northbound acceleration, 302 southbound deceleration, exit 283 southbound acceleration, exit 269 northbound deceleration lane extension, exit 279 southbound acceleration, exit 291 northbound acceleration, exit 296 southbound acceleration, and exit 304 northbound acceleration. So most of these projects were up in the Shenandoah and Frederick County area, but really important to gain this efficiency at our interchanges along that area where we were seeing significant increases in crashes and congestion. We do have 2 projects that are under construction right now. We bundled these 2 projects not only with each other, but also with a smart scale project right there at Rafine, and that is at exit 205. And that is scheduled to be completed this October. Excuse me. Upcoming projects, you can see we have quite a few in the Stanton district. Exit 221 to 220, that is the auxiliary lane that I referenced before, southbound. Construction is expected to begin late next year. Exit 221 to 225, we are expediting this project by transitioning it to a design build project, which we just put out the request for qualification, so we have started that process, and we do expect construction to begin in the spring or possibly summer of next year. Pierce Cave northbound and southbound truck climbing lanes, anticipate construction to begin in the spring of 2025. Exit 242 to 248 northbound and southbound. So this is through the Harrisonburg area. This is almost on par with the project that I talked about in Salem district from 581 to Troutville. A very large complex project in an urban area. Partnering with the city and James Madison University has been extremely helpful. And we expect that we will continue that partnership through the execution of this project, which will begin construction in the summer of 2025. Exit 299 to 296 southbound. So this is just south of the I-66 interchange with I-81. That construction is expected to begin late in 2024. And exit 313 to 317 northbound and southbound widening. Another very large, very complex project widening through Winchester, another urban area where we have a lot of coordination to do. That project we anticipate going to construction in 2027. We've not yet been able to fund the project to begin design, but we have made a significant planning effort to understand the scope of that project much better, so that will save us anywhere from 6 months to a year when we do get to the design phase. Closer look at the operational project status. As I mentioned before, completed projects, the curve improvements, the static and flashing chevrons, the safety service patrol enhancement, lift and tow device installations on some of our safety service patrol vehicles. The towing and recovery incentive program has really helped to drive down our clearance times. The 51 additional traffic cameras has helped our traffic operations centers in response time. And our digital message signs have been able to help us to communicate much more closely with drivers in real time than we have been able to before. And then 3 minor arterial intersection improvements in Rockbridge County that we were able to complete last year. So all of that, the vast majority of the operational projects that were originally planned, there may be more in the future, those are complete. The big push now is getting to these arterial improvements on the locality system and getting those done. I mean, we have on the order of, I think it's more than 200 signals that we're upgrading along our arterial routes that parallel I-81. So a significant process on the operational projects as well. Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about project advancement. You know, from day one, our goal has been to deliver this program as quickly as we possibly can. And I think we've got some things that we can demonstrate how we're doing that. Obviously, the design build projects that I went over, that was an effort to expedite construction. We certainly will have more design build projects in the future. But looking at funding, and this is where we're very appreciative of the work that VDOT's CFO has been able to do, as well as the funding that is granted by the General Assembly. Very appreciative of this work. But in Bristol District, with regard to funding advancement, and we have all projects that are currently in the program in Bristol District funded now, but we've added the Exit 81 southbound deceleration lane extension. We've been able to advance that project. That's a $15.5 million project. The auxiliary lane at from exit 73 to exit 72 in the southbound direction, $21 million project. Exit 72 northbound deceleration lane extension, that's almost a $38 million project that we've been able to advance. And the auxiliary lane from I-77 southbound to I-81 southbound, about a $35 million project that we've been able to advance more quickly with the additional funding. And exit 45 northbound extension of the deceleration lane, almost a $25 million project. So this is a significant amount of money that we've been able to allocate to these projects to advance them into the design phase and ultimately into the construction phase. With regard to Salem District, and again, remember, Salem has far fewer projects, but much larger projects. The exit 128 to exit 137 northbound widening project is now fully funded. It was not anticipated to be funded until July of next year. That is a $265 million project. So that is a significant advancement in funding, which allows us to begin the project development process at probably about 12 to 18 months earlier than we otherwise would be able to do. Looking at Stanton District, we've not been able to fund any projects in advance yet, but as I mentioned before, with the design build project, the shift from what is a design bid build, our traditional process, to design build of the widening through the Stanton area, we will accelerate that project by 12 to 18 months. The total funding advancement to date is almost $400 million, just under $400 million. So very appreciative of that ability to keep funding these projects so we can deliver them more quickly. I'd like to talk a little bit about communications. Since day one, communications has been a priority for us. We need not only to communicate with our internal and external partners as VDOT and with the localities, but with the public. The public needs to understand where we're at with the program and what's coming and what is going to be the impact to their commutes. So one of the things that we developed early on was to have a video and podcast program so that people can learn whenever they want to about our projects. They can go to improve81.org and watch videos and podcasts that explain what the projects are about. Why are we doing this project? What does it solve? What problem does it solve? And what's the impact going to be to me? That's what people really want to know, and that's what these videos and podcasts address. To date, we've published 15 videos and 16 podcasts. We film new videos and podcasts about every 3 months. We usually do about 3 at a time. And we're going to continue this process, even in the construction phase, so that when we're in construction, people can understand what they see when they're driving down the road. We also publish a quarterly newsletter. And then my last slide is to push our program-specific website, improve81.org. So if you'd like to view any of these videos or podcasts or sign up for the newsletter, please do. And I would like to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions of Mr. Covington at this time by the committee?
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Dr.
Chairman.
Wilt.
Dave, you touched there towards the end, you touched on TRIP.
Yes.
Now, I'm not asking you to go into exact numbers and so forth, but could you push that out just a little bit, what you're seeing, you know, how that's what we all worry about when we were talking earlier about you roll the dice whether you're going to travel on I-81. Is it going to be a good day or are you going to sit in traffic in an accident for 2 or 3 hours?
Yes.
And so, yeah, just what's happening there?
Yeah, so the TRIP program just turned a year old on I-81. It's not the first deployment of TRIP within the state. And quite honestly, it's performed very, very well. We've been able to drive down our clearance times on the interstate to, literally, I think it's around 27 to 28 minutes on average clearance time. And when you compare that to some of the events that we've seen in the past that are multiple hours, even sometimes up to 12 to 18-hour events, we've been able to drive that down rather significantly. We just received a 1 year or an annual report on TRIP performance. I've not had a chance to review that yet, but that is available, and we can provide that to the committee if you would like to see that. It has performed very well.
Dave, you mentioned the improvements on between milepost 143 and 150. That's where the weigh stations are on Interstate 81. The static weigh stations, will they be necessary into the future? Is there technology that will replace those, and is that taken into consideration for these improvements?
We are communicating with DMV very, very closely with regard to the weigh station, and it's one of the things that makes that project very complicated. There are a host of others. It is a very good question, and I don't specifically know the answer, but that's a conversation that we're having with DMV as to whether, is there a timeline when DMV will adopt a new technology that will make the static weigh stations obsolete? We don't know the answer to that yet, but that is certainly a conversation that we are having.
Okay, that area on Sunday afternoons backs traffic up south, northbound, pretty far to the south on a consistent, regular basis. So I would hope we would exhaust ourselves there with any future technology. So thank you.
Yeah, I think we should. And the 3 lanes, ultimately, once that's constructed, should help a great deal with that congestion all the way back up to the 220 interchange. It should be 3 lanes all the way through that area.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Yes, sir. Ms. Freed? Merrill? Yes, sir.
This may have been in the legislation or addressed with legislation, but have you started keeping track of what would be the next projects that could be funded in the event we are able to secure additional funding, whether it be through the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act or if the Commonwealth Transportation Fund can be significantly enhanced to the legislature? I know Bill has probably heard this as much as I have. I'm continually getting pressure about what's going to come after these projects are completed. There's a lot of pressure in Frederick County to try to get 6-lane, 3 lanes each direction going just beyond 317, almost the West Virginia border. I know that's very expensive. The same is true with south from 313 down to I-66. Harrisonburg and Rockingham have also communicated with me about their desire to have more lanes beyond the current widening. So as we think about what comes next, how we prioritize that.
Yeah, well, we have prioritized all of the projects in the program so far, and there are 2 things that I would like to address specific to the Winchester widening. I mentioned previously this planning phase that we were able to move forward with without getting into our project development process, but that has really informed us a lot about that specific project, and we are setting that up with future widening to the north and south in mind. So we do see that as something that could pop up in the future, so we want to be prepared for that. With all due respect to my boss, I'd rather not talk about the future projects because I think there's some information that's coming later in these presentations that will address that. But we do have, we've got $2.87 billion in the program right now. There's another, I believe, 2.4 behind that that's been identified as a need and prioritized. And so, what we're looking at right now is those next projects that are identified within the initial I-81 corridor improvement plan is what we're going after at this point.
Mr. Merrill, you'll see some of that in some of the financial updates as well. Yes. And as you probably, I'm sure you're aware, while this plan goes out to 2033, the revenue doesn't stop. Revenue is, unless the legislature changes it.
If we do anything, we'll improve it. We won't hurt it. I can promise you that.
Is in perpetuity.
It is.
So there's more to be done. what we're trying to grapple with, of course, is how do we make that happen sooner, right? So we're working hard on that. It's a priority for this administration, and you know, if we could make it come out of thin air, we'd do that. But the point is, it's not going to stop. It's going to continue. And you saw there's about $400 million of advancement so far, bringing it forward, bringing it forward. We'll continue to do that to the extent we can, and we'll be looking for other sources. And you'll hear some IIJA comments later on by Deputy Lawson as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Covey? David, thank you. Thank you for the job you're doing for us. You've done great work, David. We thank you very kindly.
Mr. Speaker, may I, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, sir.
Mr.
Mr.
Merrill,
Thrasher?
the CFO has a few slides that will be in that alignment. I have one slide in particular that I'll address future projects that we're looking at. So more to come.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think now we'll move to the multimodal improvement plan, agenda item number 6.
Right, good afternoon. My name is Grant Sparks. I'm the Acting Chief of Public Transportation for the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. And I will be kicking off the multimodal portion of the agenda today. As you may recall, the I-81 multimodal improvement plan included some funding for the Virginia Breeze, which is the Commonwealth's intercity bus program. In this presentation, I'll provide an overview of those improvements that we've made and provide you with an update on how that system is performing today. I'll start with just a quick overview of the Virginia Breeze service. As I mentioned, the Virginia Breeze is the state-sponsored intercity bus service. It runs 7 days a week, 365 days per year. Collectively, the 4 routes that, the 4 Virginia Breeze routes run throughout the Commonwealth. They are on the screen right here. The first is the Valley Flyer, which connects Blacksburg to Washington, D.C. via the I-81 corridor. We also have the Capital Connector, which connects Martinsville, Richmond, and Washington, D.C. The Piedmont Express connects Danville to Washington, D.C., and then the Highlands Rhythm, which is our most recent route, and the I-81 funds help launch this service, connects Bristol to Washington, D.C. via I-81. Ticket prices range from $21 to $60. We do a distance-based fare structure. So the further the distance, the higher the cost, but it does max out at $60. So this slide shows a brief timeline of the Virginia Breeze service along the I-81 corridor. Back in September 2013, DRPT conducted the first statewide intercity bus study to identify high-level needs across the Commonwealth. That study did identify the needs on the I-81 corridor as being the top priority. So it did take us a few years to plan and procure the service along I-81. In December of 2017, we launched the first Virginia Breeze route, which is now called the Valley Flyer. And again, it connects Blacksburg to Washington, D.C. via I-81. In March of 2020, we conducted another study, this one looking specifically at the I-81 corridor and looking for expansion opportunities and any unmet needs along the corridor, specifically looking at connecting Bristol to Washington, D.C. And then in November of 2021, we launched that 4th Virginia Breeze route. As I mentioned, it's the Highlands Rhythm. So here's a look, sorry for the colors of the map, but this is a look at the Highlands Rhythm service. So we have one bus that runs in each direction on a daily basis. Northbound, starting in Bristol, it departs at 11 a.m. and arrives in Washington, D.C. just before 7 p.m. And we also have a bus that leaves southbound, starting in Washington, D.C. at 12:50. And it arrives in Bristol at 8:30. To give you an idea of the travel time compared to a personal car, roughly it takes about 6.5 hours to get from Bristol to Washington, D.C. based on the time of day that you leave. So it does take a little bit longer to use the Virginia Breeze service, roughly an hour and a half longer, but the Virginia Breeze does offer Wi-Fi on board. and we think it's a pretty good service and it's reliable. And in terms of the top performing stops for this particular route, Harrisonburg is the #1 performer, followed by Dulles Airport, Washington, D.C., West Falls Church, and Radford. Switching over to the Valley Flyer service, like the Highlands Rhythm, we have one bus going daily in each direction. The northbound bus leaves at 8 a.m. from Blacksburg and arrives in Washington, D.C. Just after 2 p.m. And the southbound bus departs Washington, D.C. at 9:35 a.m. and arrives in Blacksburg at 3:40. Top performing stops along this route, Blacksburg is the #1 stop for this one, followed by Dulles, Harrisonburg, Washington, D.C., and West Falls Church. So switching gears a little bit to performance of these routes, we're pleased to share that ridership along the corridor has exceeded pre-pandemic levels. These graphs on the screen show Virginia Breeze ridership between November and May. The left graph being the pre-pandemic figures and the right being the post-pandemic figures, or today's ridership levels. And then the light blue is the Highlands Rhythm service, and the dark blue is the Valley Flyer service. So as you can see, we are trending in the right direction with ridership. Just a few more data points for this service. The FY22 on-time performance for these routes, and it's calculated at the stop level, is 85%. So 85% of stops depart at, or buses depart from stops on time. For a long haul route, sometimes through congestion, we think that that's a pretty impressive figure. Additionally, the FY22 farebox recovery rate. Farebox recovery is the percentage of costs covered by passenger fares. For these two routes, it is 52%. When you look at our peers in other states in their intercity bus service, that's typically somewhere between 20 and 30%. So 52% is a pretty good number for us. Earlier this calendar year, we hit a milestone providing over 100,000 rides on these routes since the inception of the service, and now we're just over 110,000 rides since the service started. These last couple bullets here are kind of interesting. So we do pre-booked tickets. So in order to ride the Virginia Breeze, you have to book your ticket in advance. That allows us the flexibility to add buses if the demand is necessary. So back in December, on December 1st of 2019, we saw that there were a lot of ticket requests coming in, and we were actually able to add 12 additional vehicles to that Valley Flyer service to address the demand. So that was 12 additional vehicles in one single day, which we thought was pretty interesting. So, so here's a snapshot of the funding that was approved for this service as part of the I-81 Multimodal Improvement Plan. Starting with capital, $100,000 was allocated to bus stop improvements for the Virginia Breeze along the corridor. We have not yet implemented these improvements. We were waiting for ridership levels to even out after the launch of the Highlands Rhythm service. So sometime in the near future, we will be implementing these stop improvements once the ridership levels start to level out. And then for operations and maintenance, $243,000 was programmed for that, and that's done on an annual basis for 3 years per CTB policy. One note about the $243,000, that does not include costs such as farebox revenue or federal revenue, which also goes into paying for this service. So that leads me to my last slide here, which is a snapshot of our annual budget for both routes along the corridor. As you can see on that first row, $243,000 from that I-81 plan accounts for roughly 10% of the cost to run this service. The federal funding on the second row, which includes CARES stimulus funding and FTA 5311F funding, makes up roughly 38% of the revenues to provide this service. and then 52% of the costs are recovered by farebox revenues from passengers. So that concludes my presentation, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? Sir, Mr. Merrill.
Just one question. Are you tracking how many vehicle miles traveled are going to be reduced by people taking these buses instead of taking cars, and the impact on greenhouse gas emissions?
I think we could calculate that. I think we have the stop level data to do that. We haven't received that request.
So that might
but
be
it should-
helpful as we're applying for federal funds, if we can show that we are reducing vehicle miles traveled.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir.
Grant, you shared that on December 1, that 12 additional buses were added to address the peak load. I assume that while that was probably the high water mark, that this occurs off and on every month at different times.
Correct.
Not at that level.
No, not at that level. That was a special day for us. But every single month, we have to add additional buses on certain days. Typically, they align with holidays such as spring break for the universities, Thanksgiving. Those are kind of our busy times, and so students really enjoy this service. And whenever the student population rides, we always tend to have to add buses to the fleet.
Mr. Sparks, you said that you had to book in advance. If someone shows up at the bus stop and wants to board and can pay, do we allow that privilege or not?
I think we typically try to accommodate them. If the
Okay.
bus is totally full and there's not another bus on hand, I don't think we're able to. But I think we try to accommodate as best as we can.
Thank you. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, we thank you very kindly for your presentation. We'll move to our financial overview. I think Laura Farmer's providing that information to us. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I do think that we have Mike McLaughlin
Okay.
with VPRA, that it's going to give another update to the multimodal plan.
Sure, that's fine. Mike, I apologize.
So good, you just didn't need to even hear from me.
Well, hopefully you'll enlighten us to some better things and more exciting.
Thank
Train
you for,
coming to Roanoke. Let's talk about that.
I'm happy to be in Roanoke today.
Thank you.
I'll be here again on Monday, and we'll talk about that here in a minute.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair, Secretary Miller, for having me here. I was on a virtual presentation a year ago, so I might not look familiar, but I was on there with Jennifer Mitchell, who was Jen's predecessor at DRPT and now moved on as a friend at the Federal Railroad Administration. So you might have heard my voice before and talk a little bit about what we are presenting here today, and we have some good news to present today. So if my slides are ready. It's the Transform Rail in Virginia on the website version. There we go. Thank you. Next slide. I do this all the time.
You're in control, Mike.
Click. I'm in control. I be dangerous. There we go. So background, and some of you know some of this, but thought it'd be good to give it again, as I gave some of this last year. Wouldn't be here without the I-81 money. I want to stress that. Also wouldn't be here without money from the General Assembly. There was $83.5 million as well. In addition to $100 million from I-81 funding, there's $83.5 million well from a 2020 budget bill. So thank you, General Assembly members, that went into over a $300 million program of projects and initiative with Norfolk Southern, which I'm going to talk about a little bit here. What that is all doing is enabling a second train at Roanoke, which I'm going to call her Chair DeBrule because she's also Chair of VPRA. And I should have started out by saying VPRA was created by General Assembly a couple years ago, and 3 of us started a year ago, and now we're up to 30 plus employees. So again, a second Roanoke train extension to River Valley will come in 2026. Roanoke train's coming on Monday. Why are we doing this? Because the Roanoke route has been one of the best routes not only in Virginia, but in the country. 220,000 passengers on the Roanoke route in 2019, which is a record year. And we are seeing similar, actually higher ridership in April and May of 2022 on the Roanoke route. Over 21,000 passengers in May took the Roanoke route, took the state-supported Roanoke train. We are forecasting an estimated 80,000 net new rides on the whole route once we extend to the New River Valley in 2026. So this is all showing you the current rides and the forecast in the future that if you build it, they will come. We just finished our agreements with Norfolk Southern last week. We finished the legal agreements back in January, and we finished the purchase of the Virginian line, 28 miles from Salem to New River Valley, last week. And again, we couldn't have done all this without the I-81 money and the money from the General Assembly. And what you see here in the map are the stops. Those are the stops on the Roanoke route. So what are we doing with the money, the I-81 money and other funds? We have to build improvements. As part of our agreement with Norfolk Southern, we don't want to have too much congestion on the line, so we're building some improvements to ensure that we don't just put a train out there and it's caught in traffic. So one of the improvements starting from north to south is just south of Manassas. There's a 7-mile gap where there's only a single track. So as you can imagine, and there's also other passenger trains in here. There's some trains that come in from West Virginia, trains that come in from Danville, and there's of course freight trains from Norfolk Southern as well. So we're filling in that 7-mile gap with the funding we have. Norfolk Southern will construct these projects that'll remove that bottleneck that hopefully will be removed with the 7 miles. The bottleneck that occurs now due to the trains only single tracks. So we'll have 22 miles of continuous double track from Remington up through Manassas. And that funding, I should state, that is partially funded with I-81 funds. Also making improvements in the Roanoke West Yard. So I think a lot of you are familiar with, if we were to be able to look out through these walls and see the train tracks, you can kind of see them as you came in. The Roanoke station is nearby, and to get to New River Valley, we have to travel through the Roanoke Yard. So we don't want to do that, and again, be stuck in the yard. So we are paying $36.5 million to Norfolk Southern to construct some bypass tracks and some other improvements in their yard. As you can see, it's very, very congested, very busy and big yard. And that is actually funded with a Smart Scale grant that I should note that CTB members were actually it was a CTB member-supported Smart Scale grant. So thank you, members of the CTB, for doing that. And then on the 28 miles from Salem to New River Valley that VPRA now owns, we're going to be making some improvements as well. $14.3 million for bridge enhancement and replacement, $48 million to retrofit a mile-long Merrimack Tunnel that, if I think a lot of you are familiar, it goes underneath 460 out there. And again, if you have a mile-long tunnel, you want to make sure that there's access. If something unfortunate were to happen in the tunnel, that there's access for passengers to get out. And also some track upgrades to accommodate passenger rail service, including positive train control, a term you might have heard over the past few years in the rail community, to ensure better safety protocols for passenger and freight trains. And this is funded with Commonwealth Rail funds, which in the same legislation in 2020 General Assembly has set up VPRA, established Commonwealth Rail funds. So again, thank you to the General Assembly members for that as well. Now, one update I want to give is something that we've talked about with the public and talked about with Mr. Smoot and Secretary Miller and others, is where the station in the New River Valley will be. We had 5 options. One wasn't really a feasible option since we have our agreement with Norfolk Southern. We have to put the rail line on or near the Virginia line, which is the line to the north on this page, the green line. They are not, we do not have agreement with Norfolk Southern to have a station on the main line that runs through Christiansburg. But actually the green line that runs the north side of this page is actually pretty central in the New River Valley between Blacksburg and Christiansburg. And as you can see, 5 stations considered. That North Franklin East, like I mentioned, was eliminated because it's not feasible. On the next page, I'll show you some costs for Ellet and Merrimack, and I want to take a moment to thank Ken King publicly in front of many of his bosses for the work he did in working with us to help us with what the road costs would be. As you're building new stations, sometimes there might not be road access. So Ken was Johnny on the spot, and let's just say Ken on the spot, and helped us with some road estimates, and worked with our rail engineers to determine what those estimates are that'll help build the cost. I'm going to show you the next page. But even putting aside the locations, we had a survey, as you can see, in December, January, and February. Overwhelmingly, they wanted us to take the train to the New River Valley Mall. Again, it's centrally located in New River Valley. It utilizes existing roads in transit. There is, and Jen DeBrule knows much more about, I should say Chair DeBrule knows much more about this. The transit in the area does already exist at the mall. Less property acquisition. We only have to deal with a couple private property owners to get to the mall. And as you can see on the next page, lower costs. So the Ellet location that was on kind of east side New River Valley would have a large cost due to the high road costs. One of the goals we want to have at VPRA, anything with any public transportation systems, you want to make sure that it's accessible by transit, and we need to widen the road to allow buses to travel on the road, and that's why you see a huge off-site system cost, of kind of those road costs. The Merrimack site was on the west. Let me go back a little bit. On the west side of where the Huckleberry Trail is, for those folks who know the area, it's not accessible by roads. We would also needed to build a road in there as well. So that also added to those costs. As you can see, the two mall costs are very similar, 56, 57 million. And I'm going to go into more detail on the two mall on the mall facility here. So this is the Mall West. This will be building the station and the parking spaces at the current mall. As you can see, for those who've been in the area, Regal Cinemas, we actually held the ceremony with Norfolk Southern last May at the Regal Cinema parking lot and the Uptown Mall. The northwest part of the mall is the part of the mall that is not utilized as much as other parts of the mall for parking. So this is an option that we could utilize mall parking spaces. And we have talked to the mall. I should say we've talked to a lot of stakeholders in the area. And we believe it'll be a win-win. We'd be able to utilize mall parking spots and also bring more foot traffic in through the mall. So I do want to point out here that so our plan is to try to get service New River Valley by 2026. We are going to focus on the track and platform needed to get the train into the New River Valley. The station house, we're already working with the locals, and I should say Dr. Smoot has been very helpful in connecting us with Kevin Bird and others in the area to build a station house that, based on the rail plan and rail station policy that DRPT oversees, is the domain of the locals. And they also want to add community space to the station. So they want to make it bigger than just, which makes sense. A lot of you've been to Main Street in Richmond, you've been to the Raleigh station in North Carolina. Rail stations are offering good placemaking opportunity. You have other folks in there, whether it be retail or whether it be meeting spaces. So we're working with the locals to try to determine what their needs are for the station there. We also want to make sure that the access to the Huckleberry Trail continues. I've been out there. In fact, the first person to take me out there was Dr. Smoot. It's utilized day and night. It's a very popular trail by all walks of life, and we want to make sure that will connect well with the new station. The other option is just north of the mall. There's some land there, and this would create a new parking lot. And we're actually looking at these two options. We're also looking at a hybrid. You could actually see a station that is maybe a little closer to the mall, use the parking at the mall. Norfolk Southern has indicated they have, it's not great to build a platform track on a curve. You can kind of see that dip in the line, on the rail line. So we're looking at even maybe a combination of these two. I'm going to go on to the next page. One thing that we need to build that's going to that keeps me up at night, make sure we get this done on time, is some new connector track. So there's existing track up past the mall that turns into a Corning Glassworks, as you can see on the page here, and there's a Corning spur. Norfolk Southern abandoned about the last third of a mile of tracks about 30 or so years ago from north of that spur up to the Virginian line. So we would need to build a new connector track, as you can see in the upper right-hand part of the page. And that's not an easy task. We'll get it done, but I'm saying not an easy task because there's some elevation changes here for anyone who's been out to the Huckleberry Trail or the mall. There's some elevation changes here, and taking that left-hand turn, if you will, coming south toward the mall, that's going to be a big, pretty significant project. We're planning on getting it done by 2026. But just want to point out, another elevation change I want to point out is from the mall location down to the tracks. For anyone who's walked the Huckleberry Trail, you can't even see at eye level the mall parking lot. So you can't really see it on a map, but if you're out there, I'm sure Dr. Smoot would be happy to take you on a tour. He's really good at that. There's some difficulties and some challenges, really, some fun challenges to deal with in placing the station location at or near the mall and making sure people get safely down to the tracks. Here's our timeline. The feasibility study has pretty much ended. The environmental engineering is starting now. We are working on a task order for the engineering. Environmental has been ongoing. And we do plan to have the station open in the platform and the platform track open in 2026. The timeline for the station building is to be determined. Like I said, we have to work with the locals to determine what the needs are for the station. And getting back to what I started with and what my chair DeBrule started with, the new train for Roanoke is coming on Monday. We are having a flip of the times, if you will. As you can see, it departs Roanoke early in the morning now. It's now going to depart in the evening. I'm sure the college students in the area are going to be happy about that, not having to get up early to take a 6:30 train. And also, again, a flip in the evening, a flip in the southbound as well. Folks will be able to leave from the Washington, D.C. Northeast Corridor in the morning and get to Roanoke middle of the day. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm also happy to fly back and go through a couple other slides. I know I went through that pretty quickly if people have questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Very well done. Good information.
No, I did have, I don't think I saw a cost, to ride. What is the?
Oh, it's variable. It's a great question. It could be 20, 30 some dollars. With much like airlines, when the seat usage goes up, the cost might go up. But I just took it recently from Richmond. I think it was $28. So the Roanoke area is probably going to be in the $34 range. I could probably go on my app real quick and come up with a dollar amount.
That's good.
But by adding extra capacity, that's going to help with that ticket cost. Like I said, when the seat availability when there's more seat availability, the cost should go down. So that's a great question, and we think this is really cost competitive with gas prices the way it is now, with parking prices for anyone who's had to park up in DC and otherwise. So thank you for raising that cost. We think this is a great opportunity, another tool in the toolbox for Virginians. If you don't, cars and getting in a car and a bus are great options. We're adding a third option here, well, another option, if you will, to Roanoke and New River Valley for people in the 81 corridor to add to the multimodal options.
Well, Mr. McLaughlin, if I may, because we have acquired the Virginian line, does that mean Amtrak will be the only train on that line, or does Norfolk and Southern retain the right to use that rail line?
That's a great question. So we filed with the U.S. Surface Transportation Board a state of Maine transaction. What does that mean? The state might own the underlying tracks and land, but Norfolk Southern is the operator of record. We did the same thing with CSX on the D.C. to Richmond corridor. So Norfolk Southern will continue to run trains on that. Now, they will pay us a fee. So since we're the owner, they will pay us a fee, and there's a fee in our agreement. They're guaranteeing us a certain amount of money, a certain amount of carloads for a few years, and then and even after that, we'll continue. When they run over us, they will continue to pay us. They often run their northbound trains downhill on that, and like I said, they have the other line that's to the south, the main. So they coordinate the traffic. If you will, they're really intercoordinated, the Norfolk Southern main line in the Christiansburg area and the Merrimack line, if you will, the Virginia line and through the Merrimack area.
I will say some of the concerns I've heard with our Amtrak to the west is the alignment of the track and the lack of the ability to go faster. So now that we have acquired the Virginia line, over time, can we improve the alignment and help, I guess there's a right-of-way there that it's on, and we would have to venture outside of the right-of-way to do realignments.
Yes,
But
you're correct. We would have to venture outside the right of way to straighten some curves, if you will.
Yes.
It's a mountainous area, so we're going to have trouble getting speed up much more. Some of the improvements that were listed, there are 3 buckets of improvements on one page. When we can, we're going to try to make some straightening of some curves and improve some turnouts, if you will. It's only going to, I want to be honest with the committee, it's only going to be a few seconds, a minute here or there that's going to make improvements.
Understand the alignment and the curvature, and it was a freight line to start with, and we're now putting passenger rail on it. But I've heard some concerns of that nature. Just wanted to question that. Thank you, Mike, for a
Mr.
great
Chair.
presentation. Yes, sir. Senator Deeds.
Well, when a freight line owns the track, they have priority. If Norfolk Southern is the operator of that track, but Virginia is the owner, will the freight trains have priority over passenger rail?
So in our agreement with Norfolk Southern, we have a financial incentive for them to get us there on time. If they fall below that, they don't get their payment. But much like they pay us when they're on our tracks, we pay them from beginning point to end point. Since they're dispatching, we're paying them on the 28 miles we purchased all the way up to Washington, D.C. for this train, that they have to get us through, whether it be through the Roanoke Yard, through the line that we own, but they're dispatching, which is the Virginia line. They have to get us through there at 90% on time performance or above, or else their payment will go down. To your point, that was a concern for us, and that's why we built that into the agreement. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Thank you.
With respect to maintenance and inspection of the tracks, how is that going to work now that we're the owners?
So for the first few years before we put passenger trains on, Norfolk Southern will undertake that. And then after that, we have a right to use them if we want, or otherwise we can go to a third party. There are third parties out there in the rail industry that do that kind of work. We could just go back to Norfolk Southern, and for a minimal, for really no extra added cost. I mean, we'll have to pay them, but they're not going to make extra profit on it. We could use them as well.
Thank you.
Mr.
Any other
Chairman?
question? Yes, sir.
Along the lines of the questions related to the bus routes, was there, I don't recall seeing a time, for instance, from New River Valley or Roanoke to DC, how long people are on the train? And then also, as Mr. Merrill mentioned, as far as displacing people off the interstate, keeping some track of that or some information with that.
So to answer your first question, it's 5 hours roughly from Roanoke to Washington, D.C. It'll be about another 50 minutes. We're going to have to work with Amtrak and others to determine that when we get to New River Valley. So about 5 hours from Roanoke to D.C. That was reflected, I think, some of the timetables at the end. About another 50 minutes or so from the New River Valley to Roanoke. And the second part of your question, sir, if you don't mind.
Just if you're tracking any bit, if you've got more people traveling on the train, they're obviously not driving a vehicle, adding to carbon footprint.
The 80,000 net new rides, when I say net new rides, because some people might get on different stations or getting on stations now, we believe that's coming from a good chunk of that is coming from the interstate per our ridership study that we had. So a really good chunk of that, vast majority is coming from the interstate.
Thank you.
Any other
You can
questions?
see on the slides the Roanoke times in any case.
Now, if I may, Mr. Chair, the people that are riding it, are they the breakouts of that, is it mostly students, I would assume, or is it along with the breeze?
It's a mix, and we're actually seeing, during the pandemic, you're seeing a mix of, you're seeing a lot more folks for non-business reasons, for pleasure reasons, other reasons riding the train. Especially, a lot of times they don't want to face traffic on the roads. So you're seeing business folks as well, but mixed students, it is hard to get a train ticket the Sunday after Thanksgiving.
Sure.
Anyone who's tried anywhere around the country on train, especially when you're going to college town areas. And as you know, this also goes through this goes through Charlottesville,
right,
as well. So it's a good mix. And we do have some data on that we've done in the past, but we're doing some more surveys, and the surveys are changing a little bit with what's happening with the pandemic. But as we can see by the ridership numbers, people are coming back.
Good.
Or new people are riding.
Chairman.
Sir, Secretary.
Thank you, sir. Mike, Mayor Green asked about the fares, and Can you speak to how those fares are set and who sets them and that process? please?
Amtrak sets them. There's an algorithm they use, in the Amtrak offices that is based on the number of seats available. Actually, we've seen a lot of fare discounts recently, $19 for Richmond to DC, if the train is more empty, and it goes up. 30. I don't usually, for instance, from Richmond pay more than $35, $40 for a one-way, but usually it's in that $20, $30 range. I often go up to Alexandria. We have an office up there. So again, it's set it's set by Amtrak.
As opposed to the bus service where we're determining that.
We can work with Amtrak and suggest fare discounts, and we have done that. Some of our highest ridership dates. Now, I should say, state-supported service. I didn't get into those details. We pay for everything in the state of Virginia. So we pay for their maintenance, we pay for their capital, we pay for their operations. So we can suggest a discount, but we're gonna end up paying for it. So we do that. We do oftentimes have a discount. I believe for the 10-year anniversary of the Lynchburg route, which is now the Roanoke route, will one day be the New River Valley route. We had a $10 fare, and ridership for that month was the highest it's ever been with the $10 fare. So we do often suggest some discounts, and when Amtrak has discounts, we always opt into them. They often come to me as the chief operating officer. My answer is always yes, because we need to get people onto the trains. But we do have a good cost recovery ratio, up on that 70+% range throughout Amtrak in our state. So hopefully that'll go up with more ridership.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Very good presentation. Okay, so now I was trying to jump ahead to Laura Farmer a few minutes ago, but now we'll welcome Laura. Laura, for your financial overview of the I-81 corridor, please.
Absolutely.
The brain trust, the smart people of VDOT now.
Oh my goodness, no pressure.
Thank you, Laura.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Farmer. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at VDOT. I feel privileged to have been at the beginning financially of the I-81 program, and I'm going to give you an update about how we are planning to pay for all of these wonderful improvements and our plan and recommendation going forward.
Very good. I'm good. Thank you, Tony.
In terms of legislative background, as a refresher to the committee, this slide just provides the background of the establishment of the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program and Fund in 2019. During that session, and it also provided transportation revenues for not just I-81, but for the interstate system itself. And then in 2020, in the omnibus transportation legislation, a piece of legislation that had many moving parts, it touched the Interstate 81 program and the interstate program by authorizing the sale and issuance of up to $1 billion to support the program. It also changed the localities that contribute their fuel tax revenue to the program. It's focused on those localities to which the interstate touches or encompass in a county through which I-81 passes. And it also has a share of the allocated funding through what we call the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program, or IOEP.
You did it.
I did it. I broke it. In terms of the funding sources and structure, there are several components of the I-81 program. It gets the regional fuels tax along the corridor and the share of the interstate program. In terms of the regional fuel tax, when it started in July of 2019, it was an additional 2.1% tax on gasoline and diesel along the corridor assessed at the distributor level. And then effective July 1st, 2020, as part of the omnibus legislation and a change to fuel taxes across the Commonwealth, it changed to a per gallon rate. And it's also subject to the CPI adjustment each year. What's important about the fuel tax revenue is that that is the piece of the dedicated funding that can be leveraged to support debt service for the bonds, as well as provide pay-go dollars to support the projects. Additionally, it receives an allocation from that interstate program I mentioned before. And I-81 receives an allocation equal to the ratio of vehicle miles traveled for trucks on the interstate compared to all other interstates in the Commonwealth. And to no surprise to this region, I-81 is the leader in truck traffic across all interstate corridors. So congratulations, that drives the funding, but it also drives the needed improvements as well. These funds are only available for pay-go, so as cash is available and allocated to the program, we use that for projects specifically and not to pay for any debt planned for the program. This graphic provides the planned use of the regional fuels taxes. It supports both pay-go in terms of as the projects are coming online, we use these funds to support their expenditures. It is also set up to provide debt service. We've established an indenture for the program. We went to market to sell debt about a year ago at this time, and that indenture has a structure that supports both senior and subordinate debt and any reserves, which make it lucrative to the market and help us with our ratings as well as the rate that we get from the rating agencies. In terms of revenue performance and projections, the table on this slide at the top provides the dedication of funds that I just went through for the program, the regional fuels taxes, and the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program. Fiscal year 20 and 21 are actual data. The fuels tax along the corridor has been strong, meeting or exceeding the estimate the last 2 years. In fiscal year 22, when I prepared our slide deck for our meeting today through May, we had received $68.7 million. I looked at preliminary data since we've closed preliminarily as of Monday of this week, and we have slightly exceeded that estimate of $75.7 million for fuel tax revenues in the current year. Just slightly, we're just over $76 million. And so, again, meeting the expectations, and we can feel confident in the future with the projections and look forward to updates going forward. This projection goes out to 2028, which is the end of our current 6-year planning horizon, but obviously these revenue streams continue past that time period. The table at the bottom just reflects a snapshot of information for the program. In terms of expenditures through May of this year, between bond proceeds and pay-go funds, we expended just over $100 million. Our fund balance is just shy of $300 million at the end of May, and our bond proceeds stand at $77 available to support project activity. In terms of project cost, when we came to you last April, our estimated project cost of for all the operational and capital improvements that all the preceding speakers talked about today of $2.87 billion. Based on the current revenue assumptions, our updated model, and improved estimating, we're at $2.7 billion for the entire program, and we believe as they're implemented in phases, the completion of the currently planned improvements will be complete in 2033. Just as a reminder, it is comprised of those two components that David Covington went through just earlier today. No single project exceeds 11% of the total program, and each project is independent of each other. When I came to you in April of last year virtually, the top table represented the output of our model, and we expected completion to wound down in 2038 with the additional of state and federal funding through the IIJA bill, as well as improved pictures on the state revenue forecast. That has been pulled forward to the anticipated completion of 2033. We've also made a change in accordance with CTB policy to absorb the operational cost of the operational improvements after 3 years. VDOT maintenance and operations program funding will begin absorbing those costs, and so that's why you see the operational improvements line not continue past 2028.
So Laura, if I might jump in, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Please.
So the difference represents about $165 million over the period of the slide. So you're really getting a little bit more bang for your buck because we're funding it out a different method.
Yes. definitely.
So that's a good news piece.
Correct.
Just wanted to
Thank you.
highlight that.
Information.
This slide provides just the funding by year and by source to support project expenditures. And that's a piece I would like to stress on the takeaway here, is that the program itself and the planned projects are well balanced between pay-go and a multi-lien structure for the debt. We are pursuing TIFIA loans, which I'll describe a little bit currently. That's a way for the department and the board to try to maximize the interest that we're paying on the authorized debt and make our funds go further. Also, over the period, we maintain healthy cash in the fund to deal with inflationary adjustments or other changes over the life of the program that we can not foresee today. On the graph on the left-hand side, the line at the top just represents the expenditure pattern we expect on the projects. As you can see, starting in 2025, expenditure activity along this corridor and on the projects itself will greatly exceed the annual revenue for the program by design. All those projects that David talked about that are going to construction, those will be very active in the latter half of this decade. And so those are as expected, and we have a debt plan as well as a managing the cash on hand to see us through that time period. And so I feel pretty good about that. The pie chart on the right-hand side also just provides a picture that over half of the improvements are funded with pay-go funds and not debt along the corridor. In terms of a debt issuance plan, it's important to remember that the regional fuels tax is what's supporting debt that we issue for the program. It does not impact the debt capacity of the Commonwealth by being backed by that regional source. It's very similar to the bond programs by other regional authorities in the state, in Northern Virginia and in Hampton Roads. And it's a mixture of municipal bonds as well as Transportation Infrastructure Financing Innovation Act, or TIFIA loans, that we are currently in negotiations with the Build America Bureau at the federal level to access this financing program. The table at the bottom just provides a picture of what our current plan is. We issued debt last summer of just over $100 million to support one of those larger projects that Dave mentioned. And we also have planned TIFIA loans, hopefully closed by the end of the calendar year this year, and then future financings to get us through the remainder of the heavy capital execution for just shy of the $1 billion authorized for the program. It's a little more background. I won't go into a lot of detail about the TIFIA program, but this structure and the benefits of it allow us to maximize the benefits to the program. TIFIA has a rule loan option where we can finance up to 49% of project cost at 1/2 of the 30-year Treasury rate. So I don't want to talk about Treasury rates today and what's going on right now, but at the same time, we still believe that this is a viable option for the program and probably better than what we would see in the market, but obviously we're continuing to monitor the situation. Otherwise, in areas like the urban area of Roanoke, that's where a regular loan qualifies, where it allows us to finance up to 1/3 of the cost of projects at the 30-year Treasury rate. It has 35 years after substantial completion is our repayment term that we expect on this, very similar to the debt we've issued. And it also has a flexible payment structure. The most important piece is it just allows us to advance projects with the use of this debt financing, and that's the piece I want you to take away from this today. In terms of projects in the 6-year program, as Mr. Covington mentioned earlier, there are 2 projects that remain not fully funded. There's a requirement in the Code of Virginia that as projects in the interstate program advance, they need to be fully funded. And so it's really great for us. It provides stability that we're going to see a project through from its beginning to its end and see it completed across all of our programs, not just I-81 or the interstate program, but our entire construction distribution. Those 2 projects are enumerated here. And as Dave mentioned, we think with the additional 6th year being added to the rolling 6-year program, these projects will likely come into full funding very quickly as we adopt fiscal year 29 and 30 onto the end of the program. And as I mentioned earlier, with current revenue projections, we believe we have support to finish the program out by 2033 based on what we know today. So in terms of the potential for additional projects in the plan, back in 2018, the corridor plan initially identified just over 100 projects for consideration, and the prioritization happened for 64 of those, and those were what became the I-81 corridor program for completion. That totals that $2.7 billion worth of capital improvements and operational cost. Additional projects from that original list could be amended to the corridor plan, so the department is positioned to add those projects into the 6-year program to support them. As we have looked at the next tranche of what could come online, we believe that with revenue projections that we have today, we could support the completion of an additional $1 billion to $1.3 billion projects by 2040. It's important to note that by CTB policy, as well as the Code of Virginia, these corridor plans must be developed for each interstate with those dedicated funding by 2025, which the board has completed. And then we revisit those plans every 4 years thereafter. With that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to our chief engineer, Bart Thrasher, to give you some picture related to the additional projects.
Thank you, Laura. Are there any questions of Laura before she retires? Laura, thank you kindly. Appreciate your information. Thrasher, welcome.
Secretary, Mr. Chairman, the brain trust has now left the podium.
So he's our
Fortunately,
chief
you're left.
engineer, so that's a scary thought.
You're left with me. To answer Mr. Merrill's earlier question, can work the, here we go. So we are looking at other projects, and it's to be proactive on the part of VDOT to do this. We have 64 projects that are capital that we've been looking at over the past since 2018, 2019, and we are looking at projects. You heard Dave talk about earlier the 3 main items we look at on the 81 corridor. It's safety, reducing congestion, and increasing economic activity. When we look at these projects, that's what we looked at. So these are the next 5 mega projects along the corridor that we've reviewed, and these are not in the current corridor improvement plan. These projects have been looked at from regards to congestion, delay of traffic, safety, and economic development. We've reviewed both the scope and the estimates on these projects, and we believe that these represent the largest projects that will have the largest impact on the corridor after the first tranche of projects are through. I'll just quickly go through them. The first one is the southbound widening between exits 137 and 138. Mr. Covington talked about the project before that that's northbound. This will be southbound. In our Stanton district, northbound widening to mile marker 190 and exit 195. Stanton again, northbound widening between exits 298 and 300. Mr. Covington again talked about the northbound portions of this from 296 to 299. In our Salem district, north and southbound, a realignment of the S-curves and Botetourt, which is mile marker 167 to 168. Last, southbound widening exit 195 to mile marker 190 in our Stanton district. You can see the range that we have of these estimates at a preliminary basis. They range anywhere from roughly $660 million to $830 million. These are significant projects. They will be significant projects on this corridor. And these projects will be in the next tranche of projects coming in after in 2033. So what the department recommends is that the I-81 Advisory Committee take a look at these projects. And if you have questions for us, we'll be more than glad to go through those, get back with you for our next meeting in regards to what these projects may be moving forward. I'll be more than glad to answer any questions the panel may have.
Mr. Thrasher, thank you. And I know most of these milepost markers and some of these projects very well. And the Salem to southbound, there's a gap there that we're not going to complete. And we'll have from exit 119 all the way to exit 150 in Botetourt, 3 lanes in northbound. But we will not complete that in the southbound side. And that's the gap that I think Dr. Smoot is as familiar with as I am. It's going to create a bottleneck if we don't address that issue. The widening at 190 to 195 in Stanton is hugely important, as are all the others. All those projects. There's a lot of fatalities at the S curves in Botetourt, as there have been, is right where I live, about the middle of the interstate. The accidents themselves are not whether I don't want to say they're not bad. They're not as impactful as a diversion of the traffic off the interstate, because we have single lane and through the town of Buchanan and across the river there. There's a lot of problems associated. So I really appreciate the forward look that we're taking with the I-81 improvements, and I think that's significantly important that we do look at our revenues. Thank you, Laura, for that. And we look at our abilities to finance and fund significant improvements going forward. That's doing our due diligence, Mr. Secretary, and we thank you and Mr. Commissioner Burich and the whole staff for that. That's important for the success here. But any other questions or comments from the committee in regard to these projects?
Chairman, if I could just add on.
Secretary.
It's important to note that we're showing these potential projects. They have not been selected. Would go through this group, also through the CTB, and ultimately whatever we decide goes to the 6-year plan and through that process. So these are ones that have been preliminary identified as likely or maybe potentially likely. And over the next course of months, and y'all will look at them, we'll look at them, and continue to refine them, and there might be different ones that we look at. So I just want to make sure it's clear that these are not on the to-do list yet. They're ones we're looking at and thinking that they deserve our time and effort to look at them.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Secretary. We don't know what inflation is going to do to the cost of the construction going forward, and these are revenue projections. We're all aware of that, but I think it is important that we look forward and we do plan. As you said earlier, and I said, we have a revenue stream going forward for I-81 now. Initially, Laura, if I recall, that was about 150 to 60 million a year in projected revenues after the main revenue stream ended. So we do have monies to make improvements, so I think we should continue to identify. But I think I hear you, Mr. Secretary, in regard to this committee. Between now and the next time we meet, I think any information this department can provide us that they see as significant or important for these projects to be considered and to be recommended to the CTB would be very beneficial. Mr. Chief Engineer, we would suggest that you keep us informed, if you would, please, with that.
Sir.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Friedman?
Mr. Chairman, the question
sir.
on the revenues, I understand the fiscal year 22 is preliminary in and above budget, but I'm just curious if for calendar year 22, if there are any negative trends due to inflation and or potential slowdown in the economy, as well as electric vehicle usage.
We have not seen a dramatic impact to the corridor in regards to construction of projects and the bids coming in. Now, that's not to say that we won't. We have seen costs go up, but we have been able to keep the costs within the overall program limits financially. You may have a project that may come in high, but overall, along the corridor, we've been able to keep the costs within the overall budget.
And the electric vehicle usage is not going to be not going to have a significant impact in 22.
Very good.
It's insignificant at this point. Going forward, and as you probably are aware, there's a offset that they pay if you have a high mileage or electric vehicle. You pay more for registration. It's discounted, and it's set on I think it's 12,000 miles or so a year that they expect you to drive, and then we go through the math and charge you a little bit more at your. We try to get that tax back at registration, if you will, on a discounted basis. So we calculate it, we discount it down a little bit, and but it won't be significant to these numbers in the next few years. We'll see where it goes from there.
Is that clawback that you mentioned, does that come back for this funding, or that's just at state level funding?
Well, it's just state level funding at the end of the day, but
Okay.
Yeah, so to this program, it's just not going to be significant in the short term.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Thrasher and Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate your comment about these will be studied and are preliminary. Will you go back and verify that these would still have been the next highest priorities, or have there been other economic developments in terms of economic development that may have created more pressure points somewhere along the I-81 corridor, which were not identified back in 2018?
Yes, we can.
Mr. Mayor, I would probably suggest that we would continue to monitor that through 2034. And it would be the position of this body, this committee, to entertain considerations or options to that plan. As between now and 2034 or 2033, when the plan expires, I think we should continue to monitor that. Who knows what may happen in an area with economic development, traffic volumes changing significantly. So, good point. Good point. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a quick comment. That's a great question and comments about the funding. And I hope it's not lost on anyone. Everybody looking at your gas bill and grocery bill to see what that's doing and seeing what's been happening with this fund. I mean, that's phenomenal. That hats off. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Thrasher. Appreciate your help always. Laura. Okay, at this point in time, before I go to public comment, is there any discussion? I'm sorry?
You have.
I must not have the.
There's an agenda item 8 for infrastructure investment,
I do have
IIJA
that,
overview.
Mr. Secretary, I apologize.
No
Yeah.
worries.
The IIJA Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act overview. John, Mr. Lawson, you doing that for us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Secretary,
Thank you,
fellow
Secretary.
members of the
Yes,
committee.
sir. John, please.
I will take a few minutes here. I know that the time is getting late, just to kind of hit some high points around IIJA and much of the impacts or potential impacts of IIJA you've really heard about already from the other previous speakers as it relates to the highway and transit and rail programs. Let's get this to work now. There we go. So just as a refresher, I know you're all aware that the IIJA, or the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, was passed by Congress about 18 months ago now. And it included a 5-year reauthorization of the federal bill, which was the FAST Act. But it also included some additional broader reaching transportation programs, some discretionary funds, and some reach into things that hadn't previously existed. Our goals as we address the program and implement the program were really to make sure we maximize the funds. And to the previous points, we have to deal with inflationary cost, issues driven by supply chain, but we do believe it will provide additional monies to help advance programs and grow programs. And you've heard some of that earlier. Our administration is really focused on moving things forward, making sure we get more than our fair share. And we really want to ensure that we have a best-in-class infrastructure. We are standing behind the Commonwealth and all the Commonwealth's localities and partners to be able to support them with federal grant applications. There are numerous opportunities for discretionary grant programs, and we are fully supporting those, whether we are doing it through applications from the Commonwealth themselves or directly, or supporting applications from other localities. The program in whole, this is nationwide, is $1.2 trillion. We talk billions a lot. We don't speak trillions too often. Of that amount, about $550 billion of that is above the baseline of the FAST Act. 470 of that is related to formula funds, and about 180 billion is related to competitive grants. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of grant money to be had. Over the life of the bill, it's a 5-year bill, again, 22 through 26. Virginia's expected to receive across all the breadth of the IIJA about $10.5 billion, and you can see there it comes in form of many different federal agencies. When you focus in on transportation, the USDOT piece, there's about $8.2 billion expected for Virginia. Looking into the Virginia, the transportation component, you can see here across the 5 years of IIJA, there's about $2.1 billion of additional funds available for the Commonwealth. And I'm just starting at the bottom of the page. There's about $1 billion of funds that is being made available for the construction program. And then the other $1 billion is related to the discretionary programs you see there in kind of the top part of the program, those 4 programs: bridge, protect, carbon reduction, and electric vehicles. You notice that of the ones listed here, the ones that have amounts in 27 and 28 are programs that continue. The ones that don't have monies in those years were specifically tied to the 5-year window of IIJA and will sunset unless future action, federal action, takes place to continue them. Coming out of IIJA, and the first line you saw on the discretionary ones was the bridge program. The CTB took action in December, January to get moving on those bridge programs, and Commissioner Bridge has worked hard to put kind of in place a bridge investment strategy, and that is largely funded through the State of Good Repair program today, but he's expanding that to use the bridge rehab funds. And as part of this program that he laid out in December and the board acted on in January, there were 2 specific bridge projects that were selected for funding that are in the I-81 area. We mentioned the additional funding for the construction program. That share of the construction money, and as Ms. Farmer mentioned earlier, of the portion that goes into that interstate program, the funding for the interstates is broken out by truck mileage, and currently that is almost 44% to 81. So those funds, that uplift is providing about $100 million of additional money to the corridor. And part of this is what was supporting the advancement of the projects that you saw discussed earlier. The 3 other areas are underway. They are the other Deputy Secretary, DC. She is kind of leading the effort of IIJA for the Commonwealth. So there's a lot of effort ongoing there, not for just these particular projects, but for all the projects across the Commonwealth, as well as looking at these competitive grant programs you see down below. And the next couple of slides I'm going to hit on are a little more specific to transit and rail, and I may look to Director DeBrule or Mr. McLaughlin about questions any particular questions related to these. But you heard earlier the discussion about Western Rail and how that is underway, and again, we are really excited and looking forward to the start of the second train to Roanoke on the 11th. You heard Mr. McLaughlin talk some more about the 81 corridor and the program. What's important here is that I really want to point out that we have applied for a grant for $300 million to support the Long Bridge program, and this will provide some really needed funds that can accelerate the current Transforming Rail program, which will then allow that program to expand, because there's future components of that program that have yet to be programmed or because of the funding in the window that we are operating in. There are some opportunities with Christie to be able to get funding for the New River Valley Station, as well as some funding potential for the Bedford Station. There's some work moving forward on the Bristol Rail Corridor development. As you can see, you know, the framework is kind of being put in place to guide the future development. I think there's a notice pending from Federal Rail Administration that will allow us to submit a proposal, a grant application to seek funding for that. And I think there's some active work. Dr. DeBrule, would you like to speak to that related to the efforts with Tennessee?
Yeah, I just want to be clear that the Corridor Identification and Development Program, part of IIJA, is not a funding program, but it's a gateway. And so by submitting corridors for consideration and to go into this program, it sets us up for future federal grant opportunities with the FRA. So it's really the gateway step for Bristol. And we view this corridor as rail through Bristol, and we're working very closely with Tennessee in anticipation of that notice to come out later this year, so we can submit a proposal jointly with them to consider continue the work that we're doing in that corridor as well.
Thank you, Director. And then there's some additional opportunities related to transit connections. And Director, would you like to speak to these too?
So there's a lot of discretionary funding in the IIJA for our transit agencies. Historically, Virginia transit agencies haven't pursued this. We were very proud to partner with a number of transit agencies around the Commonwealth to submit applications that were due to the Federal Transit Administration back in May. It's the largest number we've ever submitted from the Commonwealth, and we anticipate a positive response. But we did see back in earlier this year, we did get notice that the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission was awarded almost $1 million in discretionary funding for their central transfer facility in the city of Stanton. That's something that we partnered with them on that application. Very excited about that, and I think that's a sign of good things to come, as we've partnered with a number of transit agencies in the corridor to apply for funding for replacement buses and facilities. All of those systems provide service that feeds into our Virginia Breeze and helps with that multimodal connection in the I-81 corridor. We're already looking ahead. We know that this will be another request for proposals that will come out from FTA early next year, so we're already working on what we want to apply for, taking a really strategic approach so that we can continue to support that multimodal travel in the corridor.
Thank you, Director. So, Mr. Chairman, committee members, you know, what I hope you see here is that IIJA has really kind of provided us another opening and opportunity to seek additional funds and support for the 81 corridor. And as we move forward identifying additional projects, we will have opportunities beyond just the funding that we know is coming through the formula programs to be able to seek and support grant opportunities for additional or to advance projects along the corridor.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. We appreciate that. Any questions of the Deputy Secretary Lawson? And we thank you kindly. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, that basically concludes the majority of our agenda. Before I go to public comment, is there any conversation or discussion among the committee from anything we've heard today that you feel like you'd like to discuss or talk about, or bring someone back to the dais to ask questions? Everyone okay? Good. All right, thank you. So at this time, we're going to open up the floor for some public comment, but before I do so, I'm going to ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment by phone will follow in-person comment. A caller may be placed on hold until others have called in earlier or have had the opportunity to speak. So do we have anyone online to speak? We have no one online. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience at this time who would like to come forward? And if you would, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Hi there. My name's Don Langray. I live at 1326 Woodbine Street here in Roanoke, Virginia. Thanks for making this convenient for me. Since it hasn't been acknowledged yet, I'd like to note the sad, tragic passing of Matthew Frazier, a VDOT worker who died tragically on I-81 about a week ago at the hands of a reckless tractor-trailer driver. Unfortunately, he's not the first person to die in that manner on that highway, as you all know. Last year, there were 3 deaths: Gary King, Janet Rittenauer, and Candy Porch. All these people, their families are still suffering because of this behavior on this road. And I bring these tragedies up to illustrate one of the issues brought up in the actual I-81 corridor improvement plan. It noted in several places in that plan that 70% of the respondents, I being one of them, noted that we really support increased traffic speed enforcement on that highway. And it's not happening. And because in that improvement plan, it also noted that this committee was tasked with forming an I-81 corridor speed enforcement task force. And I bring that up, and I wanted to bring this up specifically with all of you because it's almost 4 years now. And I've watched a couple of these meetings online. I'm here today. I've read through the minutes, and I haven't seen any mention of this task force yet. And so my specific question to you all is, do you have any intention of forming this task force? And if not, why? Okay. It's great to hear $400 million being used to increase more asphalt on the highway. That may limit, that may decrease some of the congestion on that road. But we know, I think we could all agree, that those additional lanes are not going to cure or solve reckless speeding by tractor trailers on that road. And so I appreciate the opportunity to address this issue with you, and I really urge you to consider forming that task force and getting something going.
Okay, I'm sorry, would you state your last name again, please?
Langrehr, Langrehr.
Mr. Langrehr, thank you. We appreciate you being here, and we do regret the fatalities that happened to our highway workers. It's a very dangerous place to work, and I apologize for not mentioning and bringing that as a moment of silence when we began this meeting today in consideration of that family. I think that gentleman was from Clifton Forge, as a district that I represent, and so I regret that deeply. I don't recall the petition in the legislation for the speed task force, but I will go back and look at that. I will say part of our problem has been our state police are currently down. I say currently, I don't know the exact status, but we were over about 300 troopers for a significant period of time, and our superintendent of state police has had a difficult time filling those positions. We're currently, through the budget appropriation, we had a significant increase in pay to try to encourage and promote and recruit more officers, and we do need more officers on the highway. I understand. I think we've done quite a bit to improve the enhancement of safety along the corridor for the motorists, for people traveling in passenger vehicles and trucks. But we certainly got a long ways to go. But I will go back and look at the responsibility associated with the speed task force and see what those requirements are and see if we can't make improvements there, Mr. Langrehr.
It's pretty clearly labeled in that report. There are 3 specific recommendations.
Sure, I'll see what that detail is. Thank you kindly for coming out today. Appreciate it. Anyone else in the audience who would like to speak or address the committee? Okay. Any other business to come before the committee? Secretary, you have any?
Mr. Chairman, I just appreciate the work that this committee's doing, your leadership and the leadership of the committee members, and my job is to support you and bring the best that we can bring, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to be best in class. Just as a point of information, it's not relevant one way or the other in terms of the tragedy, but the worker that was killed was a contractor. He wasn't a VDOT employee. That doesn't change the fact of the tragedy, and our hearts and prayers go out to his family. So I just wanted to make that point. But, you know, we lost 29 people last year on the highway and work zones. 29 folks. And I was at a memorial, if you will, earlier in the year down in Fort Monroe, Virginia. And when we were celebrating or memorializing at the same time Highway Work Zone Safety Week, which was started by a VDOT employee and has gone national. So we were part of a national remembrance and folks that were killed. And there was a young lady that came to speak who was at a rising senior, I think, University of Tennessee. And she was on a scholarship provided by this group. Her father was one of those folks that got killed some years back. And when I got there were 28 orange and a couple black cones. And I wasn't sure what that was all about. They're arranged in sort of a formation. And that was representing the people that got killed on our highways last year in work zones, right? We had another almost 1,000 people killed on the roads of Virginia last year. So it's a huge problem. It's getting worse, and we are battling it, I can assure you, with every way that we can. So,
Mr. Chair, if
Senator Deeds.
about 13 or 14 years ago, there was a trooper who was from Bath County but was working somewhere else and was killed in an accident. I think up in Clark County, maybe. And it was during the legislative session. I got a ride back on the state plane to Roanoke and was driven from the airport here to the funeral by a state trooper who was stationed in Roanoke County. He told me at that time, and this was about 2008, I think, there was one state trooper on duty in Roanoke County, Roanoke City, Salem, to do 581 and 81 together. I think it might be worthwhile for you, Mr. Chair, to write the superintendent of state police a letter and find out what's going on. Find out how many officers are working in the corridor in any particular duty shift, and where they are. It might also be useful for us who use the interstate. It is a good question. I think there are other things we can do to deal with speed. I think things with engineering or with signage that might relate to speed. I remember former Delegate Ben Klein, now Congressman, talked about taking old used police cars and stationing them along the interstate. Well, I thought that was kind of silly at the time, but I don't know that it's that silly. I mean, anything that'll slow traffic down is worth considering. But you might use your leverage to reach out to the superintendent and try to get him to give you a report.
We will certainly do that, Senator. I'll be happy to write a letter to the Superintendent of State Police and ask for that. I don't know, I just had a conversation with a representative of State Police on our way home from Richmond yesterday, and I asked the question of how many officers we were down at this time, and he said, I don't have that report. I can't answer that question specifically, but I know at some short time ago, we were still down about 300 officers.
Mr. Chair, I think that is absolutely correct, but I know that in the budget, there's a significant amount of money for raises and also to deal with the salary compression issue.
That's correct.
So we've taken some important steps to rebuild that force. It's just a question of whether they're able to fill the vacancies and get them out to work.
I will write a letter as a representative of this committee and request some information from the superintendent, Senator Deeds. I thank you. I would like to thank the Secretary and his cabinet and all of the VDOT individuals and Ms. Day, who does such a phenomenal job organizing this meeting for us, and everyone. I thank all the citizens representatives, the legislators. What we do is often not easy in Richmond when we have to raise revenues, raise fees to generate revenues to make these kinds of improvements, but they're necessary, and it has to happen. So I thank all of you, the CTB members present today. All of you do valuable work for the Commonwealth, all three transportation districts. You guys and your staffs do great work. We'll get there. We're making improvements, and that's our responsibility, and that's our task of this committee, is to continue to make those improvements. So I thank each of you, and we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a motion to adjourn? A second. We're adjourned. Thank you.